Joining us live now is the Liberal Senator Holly Hughes and Labor MP Matt Thistlethwaite for our regular panel. Good morning to you both.
Morning, Pete.
Matt, I'll start with you. You're in government and
Morning, Pete.
Your government under more pressure now to do something about gas prices, which the budget sidestepped. Have you missed the biggest issue facing the country so far?
I don't believe so, Pete. We know that a lot of households and businesses are under stress because of rising gas prices. Unfortunately, Australia's been in no man's land for the last decade when it comes to transitioning our economy away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. The previous government delayed that transition and we're now all paying the price for that. But we know that we need to do something about gas prices, and Chris Bowen and Madeleine King, as the energy ministers, are now working on a plan, and those details will be released in the coming weeks.
Holly, with that said, power prices were already on the way up. There was a trajectory while you were in government. Did you hand Labor a hospital pass?
No, absolutely not, because the relationship that our former Energy Minister Angus Taylor had with the gas company ensured that these sorts of prices were not becoming an issue, that we were seeing supply being put into the market. It was as soon as we saw this government come in, and we know they have an Energy Minister who referred to a gas-led recovery as BS, who has gone out of his way to demonise the gas companies. So it was as soon as this Labor government came in that we saw the problems escalate. We saw that they had to go to AEMO intervention, which created problems with a price cap. What we're seeing now, though, is a delay to projects, and we need to see that the Beetaloo Basin gets up and running soon. We need Kurri Kurri gas plant. We need to make sure Narrabri is online. We need to make sure that these gas projects are allowed to go ahead. We also need to have a better look at what this safeguard mechanism is that they've put around the 43% legislation, because that's creating problems for the gas sector as well.
So, Matt, can you get a solution by January 1?
Well, we're working on a solution at the moment. I guess the other point to make, Pete, is that no one anticipated that the war in Ukraine would crunch energy markets the way that it has, particularly that important supply of gas from Russia being taken out for European markets and for many Asian markets. And
that's got nothing to do with us. We don't have
there's been an increasing demand on Australian supplies, and many of those have been shipped overseas.
But this all predates your time in office, though.
Absolutely. The Ukrainian war was not an issue before the election. In fact, we were actively dismissed by the Labor Party when the Ukrainian war was brought up as an issue at all, that it had no impact whatsoever. So it seems a little convenient that post the election, when they're making a complete hodgepodge of everything in the energy sector, and it's everything in the energy sector, it's not just gas, it's across the board. They're allowing early closure of coal. They're refusing to have any discussion around small modular nuclear. Well, 30 countries around the world with similar economies are looking exactly at that. Chris Bowen said last week at the Energy Ministers' meeting, everything was on the table. Well, no, it's not. Everything is not on the table. It is ideologically what's on the table that suits the Labor Party.
Yeah, I mean, with that said, I mean, are you just caught at the moment, Matt? You don't know what to do.
No, that's not the case at all. We've got a plan that we took to the last election, and we received a mandate for that, and we're implementing that plan. But we've had a decade where we've had no energy policy in this country, and we're all paying the price for that at the moment. And
Matt, you had a plan that was backed by Reputex modelling that's been discredited.
That if you did not have a plan to transition to renewables, that the cost would be greater at the end of the day, and Australians are paying for that intransigence and that lack of plan at the moment. Now, we developed a plan that we took to the election, and we're implementing that plan. We know that renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy, but the previous government did not support it. So we're now in this process of no man's land where we're trying to transition to that cheaper form of energy, renewable energy, as quickly as possible. But we need to make sure that the infrastructure is there to support it, and our investments in improving the transmission network will help with that. We need to get offshore renewable energy up and running, and that's starting to happen in states like Victoria at the moment. But we will come up with a short-term solution to gas prices, and that will be announced in the coming weeks. And the government's finishing off those consultations at the moment.
OK, speaking of consultations, we'll move to IR now, Matt. More critics, and led by the business community here, are pushing back against the IR legislation. Have you rushed it by placating unions over business?
No, we haven't rushed it at all. We took this policy to the election. We received a mandate for it. It's been, close to 9 months since the election, and we've been working and consulting with unions, with business and industry, and indeed the crossbench, and the legislation has now come into the parliament. I think it's interesting that it's only big corporations that are complaining about this legislation. I don't see any workers.
Oh, it's not just big
small
corporations.
business.
Small
businesses are pretty unhappy.
Hang on. So in your electorate, are small businesses not complaining?
I haven't had small businesses writing to me about the IR reforms. No, I haven't. And
Could be because most people don't really know what's in them because you've shut down the inquiry.
Workers wanted two things. They wanted greater security of employment and they wanted to get wages moving again. You see, workers have been falling further and further behind. Families have been falling further and further behind. We've got inflation running at over 7% now, but wages are only running at 3.5%, 4%. And that's been the case for basically the last decade, and workers have been falling further and further behind. Our reforms are aimed at ensuring that the bargaining system works once again. We need to get enterprise bargaining going again to ensure that wages are moving again and ensure that we have productivity improvements in our economy. And that system's been broken, and these reforms are aimed at fixing that.
But as bigger strikes lead to productivity?
Look, the protections that are there in the Fair Work Act around industrial action will remain for these reforms. So you can't just take strike action willy-nilly. You have to be in a bargaining period. You have to give notification. Workers have to vote to support that industrial action. And at the end of the day, the Fair Work Commission has to approve it. So those protections will remain in the Act as they are at the moment under the former government. None of that will be removed. It's about making sure that we're boosting bargaining.
Oh, will it be that simple, Holly?
No, it will not be. And when we're seeing the abolition of the ABCC, we're going to see all the disruptions on the building site. This was a government who came in saying, we will be transparent, we want open and honest government, who last week in the Senate voted to shut down an extension of the 3-week inquiry that they're allowing into this very complicated bill. It is not a simple bill. Anything around industrial relations reforms is complex by its very nature and its impact. And in fact, the Coalition, we shifted our position on our amendment to support David Pocock's amendment to just move the reporting date by a few more weeks, and that was shut down by the Labor Party and the Greens. They are walking away from transparency at every opportunity that they get.
Did you deliberately keep wages low?
No, and inflation was very much lower under us as well. What you're going to see at the moment, you've got the Reserve Bank looking at another increase rate rise. You've got inflation at high levels that you never saw under our government. And you've got energy prices going up. You've got grocery and all those additional daily costs going up. They will only become worse under these sort of IR reforms that increase strike action because it's about supply chain. Whilst the Labor Party might talk about the unions and the workers that are under those unions and that sort of that environment, everything goes up when you start to interfere with supply chains and production. So we're going to keep seeing all of this increases on inflation. And if the Reserve Bank keeps reacting with interest rate rises, it's going to cause problems across the economy.
And just a final point on that today, it's going to go up again today, Matt. The Reserve Bank, the RBA is going to increase it either a quarter of 50 or 50 basis points. What does that say to you?
Well, we know that that families are struggling because of inflation. We know that, and that's why the budget was aimed at relieving some of that cost of living pressure without making the system inflationary. So cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, improving paid parental leave. All of those reforms are aimed at supporting families.
Doesn't address the now, though.
Doesn't do much for everyday living.
But that's the importance of getting these IR reforms through so that we can get bargaining going again. We can get wages rising again. You know, at the Fair Work Commission...
You know, an increase in wages normally leads to an increase in inflation.
The lowest paid workers in Australia. The Fair Work inquiry into the lowest paid workers in Australia Labor supported a $1 increase in their wages. These are the people that are doing it the toughest, that are really, really struggling. The opposition didn't support a wage increase for low-paid workers at all. And that says everything about their approach to
It's also about protecting
relations.
small businesses
we are
who can't
supporting
afford
getting
it.
wages again, growing again for workers so that they can keep pace with the cost of living pressure that they're facing.
We are out of time. Matt and Holly, appreciate that. As always, thank you. Hope you're back a winner today, wherever you are.
Thanks,
Coming
Dave.
up, authorities officially charge